How do I know the Scriptures is to be believed? Because Jesus Christ has told me so.
This is the Westminster Podcast. I'm Nate Shannon. I'm glad to have here with me today Luke Carson and his lovely wife, Charis, visiting from a faraway place. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being here, and I'm especially excited to be to have you here and talk with you. I see some relationship between your ministry and mine, and Luke, you may know I work with an ally of yours. Your father is my boss, so actually it's good that you're here because I have no dirt whatsoever on him. I have only good things to say, so maybe you could help me gain some leverage in my workplace. But we work in global ministries. I and with your dad Stafford, and we try to bring Westminster curriculum to faraway places, to different global contexts. And the idea is to strengthen the church and to provide solid theological education for the sake of God's people. In contexts which are not traditional for Westminster and which might seem to some unlikely. And that makes me think of your ministry, Luke and Charis, where you work, where you serve the Lord, and what you're up to day to day. So I've been told that in this case my ignorance is an advantage. So I'm going to defer to you guys. Luke, if you could give us a kind of a introduction to what you're up to and who you serve with.
I work for London City Mission. I've worked for them for about 15 years. My job title is Team Leader for Prisons and Resettlement. So I we kind of oversee our prisons and resettlement ministry, which obviously happens inside prison and then when people get released from prison as well. The aim really is to mobilize churches into that ministry. LCM's old model, which maybe I'll talk about a bit more in a minute, was that missionaries be sent into places that the church couldn't really get to, or we used the term least reached. And then a few years ago, they realized we really had to work more on mobilizing churches into doing that work. So it's really getting everyday Christians to come alongside a specialized missionary or specialized mission leader and learn how to do it, and then kind of hand that ministry over to them as much as possible. So that's the way we work now, and I try and do that in prison, and then obviously with people who have been in prison as well. Okay,
so you're doing ministry, but you're also trying to work with churches to equip churches, motivate churches, to also come alongside you maybe and pick up some of the work of doing. And just for the listener's sake, that is not a Canadian accent. We're not talking about London, Ontario.
No.
Right, Luke? Give us sort of big picture. And you mentioned LCM. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, London City Mission. Obviously London, England, a very old mission organisation started in 1835. Do you want me to give you a little bit of the history of it now?
Luke, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah.
I find the history of it quite interesting. It was in 1835, there was a Scottish guy called David Naismith who came down to London. I think he'd already set up Glasgow City Mission. And in London at the time, particularly the East End of London, that was like a no-go zone. The police wouldn't even go there. They called it like a cesspool. It was like morally just so corrupt. But more like physically, there was like an epidemic of cholera from the unclean water. So it was like really unhealthy and unsafe place to live. It's where all the workhouses were. It's where like the slums were. There's a famous, I love reading Jack London, and there's a famous bit where he arrives in London and he wants to write a book about these people of the East End. And he gets a cab, I guess an old like horse and cart, and the guy won't take him past Whitechapel. That's the line. He's like, I will not go any further. Wow. So Jack London has to go on foot into this place. So David Naismith arrives from Scotland, and he goes there because the churches wouldn't go there either. These vicars wouldn't go to these families. And
having already done ministry in Glasgow of a similar type?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think it was really trying to reach the poor people in the city. And he went around the East End, and he was going to families, really, and trying to reach kids and teach them about the Bible, and I think do really basic things, like give them food as well, and like somehow get them clean water. It was really just like basic provision. And they used to call them the men with the book, because he would set up himself in these London City missionaries who'd have these big Bibles they would carry under their arms and walk around these areas where the slums were, and they called them the men of the book. And Yeah, so LCM was just sort of sending missionaries into these areas and trying to reach people that weren't connected to the church or wouldn't have any connection with the church at all. And that kind of developed into London City Mission was known for a long time for having chaplains in workplaces. So when I joined LCM, there was chaplains to the taxi ranks, to the black cabbies, to the ambulance drivers, to some of the sports teams, to the trains. London obviously has so many big major train stations. The train chaplains, railway chaplains. So that was sort of what we were known for a long time. And sort of still the same in a sense. We've got 5 specialisms now of people groups that we're trying to reach and trying to bring the churches alongside us. The prisons ministry falls under is called homeless and marginalised. So it's really anyone in London who's particularly marginalised. So that might be like very vulnerable women, might be refugees, asylum seekers, homeless people, rough sleepers, people that live in temporary accommodation, people that are struggling with addiction. So that's kind of the homeless and marginalised specialism is the one that my team falls under.
Wow. What are the other? You mentioned 5 other subdivisions.
Okay, let's see if I can remember them. There's council estates and elderly. So there's a real focus on the estates and the isolated elderly. There's so many people in London that are...
Luke, what's an estate?
What do you call it in America?
The projects.
Like the projects,
okay.
Council housing.
Publicly funded housing.
Yeah, huge estates, huge blocks. There's so many old senior people who are really isolated, who live on their own and are very lonely and quite unsafe, in a lot of ways. And so LCM puts a focus on reaching them, and a lot of that's through door-to-door ministry. Door-to-door ministry is the least cool, least popular type of ministry, but it's actually the most effective. I had to do it for a while when I joined London City Mission. I hated every moment of it. You're going around these blocks, knocking doors, trying to talk to strangers.
Just cold knocking on doors. Yeah.
Horrendous. Okay. It was the worst, but we have to do it. When you join the mission, you have to do a bit of experience of it.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's intriguing the way you put it. Sounds challenging. I can't resist. Tell us a little bit about what that's like. And of course, we're not thinking of suburban ministry. It's a little bit more of a volatile urban context.
Yeah, this is inner city, estates, and actually London's sprawling. It grows and grows, just keeps going and going and going. And there's council estates everywhere. You get a whole range of issues on those estates, not just the isolated elderly that I mentioned. I mean, London City Mission takes door-to-door ministry so seriously. We run conferences on it. We run conferences on how to train churches how to do door-to-door ministry.
How about that?
Some of our missionaries, some of our team, and some church members love it, and they have huge success from it. It's just not what I want to do.
I think it's a special calling, Luke. I agree with
I reckon.
that. Yeah.
I mean, we do it inside the prison. I always joke to my colleagues, say we do door-to-door inside prison, cell to cell ministry. We're banging on people's cell door and trying to talk to them through a little couple of inches gap in the door. Wow. But let me try and remember these other specialisms. So what was that? Council estates and elderly, children, youth and schools.
Okay.
Which is an obvious one. I think most churches in London don't know what it's like over here. They want to have a youth ministry. But a lot of them just don't really need support and help in doing that. And also reaching kids of different faiths, in schools. We've been really lucky that we're part of a thing called the Life Exhibition, which is running a sort of interactive sessions in schools, actually where the majority of the pupils would be Muslim, who come and hear about, the resurrection and, evidence of the Bible in this kind of fun, interactive way. And thousands and thousands and thousands of young pupils come and do it, and they bring churches along to run it alongside these local schools.
Into the public schools, Luke?
Yeah. People think going into schools and talking about religion or even the gospel is a no-go, but it's actually not. It can happen. We also, under that department, we have an amazing project called Operation Forgiveness. There's a colleague of mine who his wife lost her little brother when he was 15. He got killed, and his mum works with him as well, and they tell that story in schools. So they're talking about forgiveness and knife crime, and they share the gospel in that, and the schools just love it. They get the kids to make this pledge to, not carry a knife and to forgive as well. Is there someone you want to forgive? It's really, really powerful, and they train up teams to run that project in schools. So that's been really effective, and their goal is to get that in every school in London. The youth thing is really good. We have Islam and other religions, which is trying to reach people of other faiths.
Wow.
Which we obviously have a huge emphasis on that in London at the minute. And we have missionaries that work with us from all across the world, like people, men and women who have maybe come from a background of Islam, or people that have that real expertise and can teach churches how to engage with their Muslim friend at work or their Muslim neighbour. We have people that do outreach to Hindus and Sikhs and things like that. So
let me ask a question. You know, coming from the American context, as you mentioned, I think it's difficult for me to imagine going into the public schools as a representative of the church or a Christian ministry. I don't know if the context is different, but I imagine you've had a lot of interaction with public policy. I'm thinking in each one of these sort of subdivisions of London City Mission. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
I'm definitely not an expert in that. I don't know. What I do know is that the schools teams, I think, have had surprising ease in getting to work in schools. I think with the Life exhibition and Operation Forgiveness, I'm even surprised sometimes how easy it seems, because I would have expected a lot more resistance, especially in places like East London, like Tower Hamlets is one of our boroughs where they do most of their work, and Newham, which are, you know, probably white minority. Very few Christians in those boroughs, but the churches in London City Mission do get. I don't think they've really had. They might tell you a different story, but I don't hear about them getting much resistance.
I suppose it helps if you lead with something obviously everyone would be interested in: reduction of violence and the forgiveness model.
And it's their own story as well. You know, it's a family member that you know was murdered when he was 15, and they tell that story as the starting point. So they know what they're talking about. They've got the authority to do that, and the kids love it. The teachers love it. It's really good. We've had him come and do bits and pieces of it in prison as well with some young prisoners, and it's really powerful.
Wow.
Yeah. So then we have, what have I mentioned? Oh yeah, we have Diaspora Ministries, which is working with churches from, you know, who've come to London from overseas. So a lot of African churches, Asian.
I see. Okay.
So we have a specialism that works with them. Is that 5 I've mentioned? Homeless and marginalised, council estates and elderly, children, youth and schools, Islam and other
Don't
religions.
worry, Luke, it's not an exam.
I got it. I'm pleased I got all 5.
5 for 5. Well done, brother. So tell us a little bit about your day. I know there's some things that you can't share, and in global ministries we're aware of that. You know, we work in some sensitive areas as well. But just tell us a little bit. You know, you can think, for example, the wider Westminster community of seminary students, prospective seminary students, graduates in ministry. Just tell us what it's like to do ministry in your context. What's your day-to-day? What are you thinking about? What are your priorities? What are the challenges?
Yeah. Day-to-day, Charis and I would say have slightly different jobs in that sense. You know, my focus is entirely on sharing the gospel and teaching, you know, lay people, or we call them everyday Christians, just like people from local churches in the area, to share the gospel with prisoners and ex-prisoners. That's my focus entirely. You know, Charis's job, you know, she doesn't work for London City Mission, she works for the prison. So your day-to-day responsibilities would be a bit different, wouldn't they?
Yeah, very different. So we would work together in the prison, especially on the days that Luke is in, and would run Sunday services and midweek groups and courses and things together. So as a Christian chaplain, I have a responsibility towards prisoners who would identify as Christians, either practicing or perhaps they have a traditional heritage that they would call themselves Christians, but they might not have ever heard the gospel before. And so I have a responsibility towards that people group. But then as a chaplain in the prison, I have the pastoral work, which is a variety of different people who need a chaplain to visit them that day. So that could be anyone from somebody who's at risk of self-harm or having suicidal thoughts to somebody who's recently bereaved and has lost a family member whilst they've been inside. And then chaplains have like a legal responsibility to visit 3 different people groups every day. So every day in the prison, these people groups must be visited by a chaplain by law, and that's people who are living on the healthcare wing, so people who are very, very mentally unwell, there's a little bit of kind of physical unwell, but usually you'd get sent out to hospital. So it's generally people who have very severe mental health challenges. People in our CSU, which is solitary confinement, segregation, we call it, the block. Yeah.
Would that be for disciplinary reasons primarily?
Yeah. So
or for their own safety sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah. If they're kind of a high profile, if their case has been high profile, they might get sent straight to the CSU for their own protection.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But on the most part, it's prisoners who have harmed an officer or harmed another inmate, or who have, been particularly disobedient. And then the third group is the new intake, so we call them receptions, which is basically people that came in the night before. So anyone who's new in the prison, has just had their first night, will get visited by a chaplain as well. So my work is sort of split between that chaplaincy work and then also the more gospel-focused ministry that I do with Luke.
And having Charis in that position of responsibility in the prison, and she's been doing it a long time and has earned a lot of trust, with that role, kind of opens doors for us as well, as me coming from a London City Mission perspective, and the churches that I work with, and in fact our own church that we attend as well. We've been able to build a team from our own church and have a ministry that happens inside the prison. And that might sound like a lot of stuff, but I think it's worth mentioning this particular establishment is quite big. There's almost 1,300 men in there, and that's constantly changing. I think, is it 2/3 of the guys in there will be waiting to go to court, waiting to get sentenced, so they could be there for a short period of time. Some guys there could just be there for weeks, and some could be there for years and years. So you sort of need quite a lot of ministries and activities, don't you? And we're lucky in the sense that it's one of those prisons where I think they want stuff to be happening. They don't want the men just to be banged up behind their doors all the time. They want them to be in meaningful activity or engaging with stuff. So that sort of gives us a green light to do like the groups and the activities and the studies that Charis mentioned. We do those throughout the week, and even just getting out in the wings and visiting people and spending time with them on the wings, that's seen as like a really positive thing by the governors and the authorities of the prison.
It's remarkable to me that you can be in that context and be so freely evangelistic. And you mentioned you're running Sunday services, but you're also you take on a kind of counseling role, Charis, and evangelism is woven into all of your interaction within this context.
Yeah, we have to be. There are definitely rules about how we would share the gospel and who with. Okay. But as long as you're kind of keeping within those rules and respecting them. So, for example, I couldn't, as a Christian chaplain, or even in your context, Luke, couldn't just walk up to a prisoner of another faith and be like, "Can I tell you about Jesus?" Because if that prisoner is of a different faith, then we would definitely be breaking those rules in the kind of structure of the government institution of which we work. But if they approach us, if they ask us the questions, then we have full freedom to be able to have those conversations. So a lot of the time we're praying for those opportunities.
And it's really easy. Like, I feel like we don't have to ever go out and invite people or do that sort of proselytizing thing. That's not necessary. A lot of the things we run, particularly on Wednesday afternoons, we have big groups. It can be up to 30 men sometimes coming, where it's an exploring faith sort of activity.
So is it only you guys running that, or is it an interfaith event? Or
no, it would be run by us, the Christian chaplains, and a team from local churches that we would bring in with us. So we have some really faithful volunteers who
So, Charis, your title is Christian chaplain, not just chaplain.
Christian, well, officially, if you want the full title, it's Lay, Anglican and Resettlement Chaplain.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Because of the resettlement aspect of my role, particularly through being linked with Luke, but also my background is in resettlement. So before I trained as a chaplain, I worked with people on release. So I have a resettlement aspect, but it's easier for me to describe myself as Christian chaplain, particularly because we go to an Anglican church, but I didn't grow up Anglican. So
okay.
And a lot of the prisoners,
way to say it.
I find a lot of the prisoners who are very real and curious, or even curious about their faith, don't care about denominations. They don't really understand or care. They might have a difference between like Orthodox Catholic and, you know, whatever the other denominations might be. But they're basing that on the style of worship service that they sign up to come to.
Sure.
You know, so the Saturday Catholic service will look one way, and then the service we run on a Sunday morning will look very different. And some of them will almost feel like they pick and choose based on preference of like style, you know, or what the vibe is like in the room.
Well, no one else picks and chooses based on. I'm sure that's only in your context, brother. Yeah.
Or it's sometimes in prison it could be in who has the best biscuits or cakes that they bring in for their
that's true.
groups. You know,
That's fair.
So it's just a kind of unspoken bake-off.
in some ways, in some ways, yeah.
Wow. It just is. Your ministry is very striking. So I wonder. It'd be great if you could also share some stories with us, so we have some idea. But the question I'd like to ask you is, what kind of sort of personal characteristics do you think are required of a person to do your kind of work?
That's a good question. I was thinking earlier when we started, there's almost like a really big myth that I'd like to smash. That people believe there's a certain type of person that is required to do prison ministry, and I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's for everyone. Often people come to me suggesting someone who should come and volunteer with us or be a part of the team or even get a job with us. And they think just because they've had lived experience of either prison or a life of addiction or crime, and then they've, you know, become a reformed character and they're now a healthy member of a church community, that gives them what it takes to go back, you know, and I don't think that's the case at all. Often it is really good to we need people like that involved, and we do seek them out, but it's not just for them. When we started doing prison ministry together, you know, whatever it was, 10 years ago, a lot of the team that we started to come under were these really posh, old, retired people who had probably never broken the law in their lives or never been caught anyway. They were very, very good
Insider
people.
Trading, something like that.
I
We have
know.
that here too.
I know. Well, they were sort of very clean, polished people. But over the years, I think we've really worked hard to develop teams that are diverse, you know, in every way possible, young and old, you know, people from different backgrounds, you know, different nationalities. I think that's really important because prison is like a real complete cross-section of everyone from society. It's not just like one type of person in prison. So we want to be able to reach them. I think in terms of characteristics, we're really looking for people that are committed. You know, we don't view this as a short-term thing. In London, we get a lot of volunteerism where people are like, they've watched something on TV, they've watched like a documentary and they're like, I'd love to see the inside of a prison. They hear we've got a ministry and they're like, let me volunteer. And they come once, have a walk around the wings, like, you know, see what it's really like in there and then never come back again. We want to shut that down. We're not interested in that at all. We're interested in people who want to commit for a long period of time.
Because we're asking for people to journey with people in and out of prison. It's such a big part of the ministry is on the outside, that we want to find people within churches who will continue supporting someone on release, and especially if they go back inside again. And that's a big part of, obviously, there are amazing stories of people who have got out of prison and have experienced a level of transformation and have never gone back inside. But particularly if you're working with people with significant drug addiction or other kind of life challenges, then the likelihood is they might return to prison. And,
Well, even
and
people
then
that-
what do you do, you know?
Even people that have had a big life transformation, they often end
Yeah.
up back in
Yeah.
prison as well. You know, we could tell you the most dramatic story of a guy we know of transformation. He's sadly back inside prison again now, not through his own fault at all, but because of what he did, you know, 30 years ago. That's going to follow him around for his whole life, you know, and he is a completely new man. He's literally a different person, but that's going to follow him around forever. And that takes, to be someone who wants to work with him and, you know, come alongside him and do discipleship or whatever label you want to put on it, it takes serious resilience because there's so much disappointment and so much like pain in seeing a system that's broken and seeing someone that you care about get just like ground down by that. You know, this guy and many others that we know getting recalled back to prison for not really doing anything wrong, missing a curfew or having a bit of a verbal spat when they're frustrated or upset with their probation officer, and they get slung back in prison, and then they have to wait for a year and then do parole hearing again. It's really difficult for them, and you feel that pain as well. You know, the first guy that I ever, you know, mentored in like an official capacity back in, I think, 2016. He got baptized in our church and everything, and he's back inside now, and he's in a real serious bit of trouble now. And that's hard because I've seen him through all the ups and downs. Like, I know his family really well. I know his kids. Like, he's been a part of our life for like a long time now. And he's in a lot of trouble. Like, he's going to be in prison for a while now, and he really struggles with a lot of stuff. And you need a bit of like resilience to be able to handle that, because if you're someone who's just, I don't know, a bit too soft-hearted, you need to be compassionate, but it could break you with the disappointment and watching people you care about fail and fall over again.
Seems to me an impossible, or apart from the Lord, an impossible combination of, as you said, compassion is imperative, or you wouldn't even be there in the first place, but an incredible resilience to endure disappointment after disappointment. And the way you describe it, you know, thinking again of global ministries and the persecution that the church faces in many places in the world, you're dealing with a sector of society, a group of people who, tell me if I'm describing this correctly, once they're, could I say, in the system, it's very difficult personally to recover and move on, but then also in terms of just the system itself, to escape the. I mean, you mentioned, Charis, you do ministry, or you did ministry for those who have concluded their sentence and then having to deal with all the post prison formalities and then escape all of that.
It's so difficult. The practicalities of it, like getting somewhere to live or getting a job, or, you know, that's obviously the hardest stuff. But then the kind of psychological baggage that you carry, like even the labels that are put on you, like an ex-offender. You know, we're really careful about what we say, and we get it wrong a lot of the time. But we run groups on the outside as well. So we have a discipleship group every Friday morning. And a lot of guys won't want to come to that because they want a clean break. You know, even though there's that sort of peer-to-peer support of people who have been where they've all been in prison, you know, and they understand the issues that you're going through, but some of them don't want to be a part of that. They might come once, won't they, and have a look at it and listen to the conversation and be like, nah, I don't want to be around this anymore. I want to completely separate myself from it. And even that, I find that a little bit painful at times as well, because you sort of take it a little bit personally. But
it's also totally understandable.
Yeah. And we might invite them to church or suggest a local church for them to go to, and we would set stuff up around them. Like, here's a guy who'll mentor you. Here's a community in the church who'll support you and offer you any help you need. And they don't want anything to do with it. They kind of reject that because they don't want to be known as the guy who's come out of prison. They want a fresh start.
Right. Have a fair chance at your own relationships and being judged on your merits and not
Absolutely.
your record.
So one of the biggest things that Charis and I have learned, you know, because I feel like we've been doing it long enough that we've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons, and that we're trying to pass on to our volunteers and our team now, is that a hands-off approach is often gives you a greater chance of success with someone engaging with you when they get out. So we used to be really intense in terms of like, you can come to this, you can come to this. Like, when you get released, we'll do this to help you. We had this whole long list we were like almost like smothering them with our compassion and our help. And it pushed them away a lot of the times. Whereas time after time, we've seen the people that we're a little bit more hands-off with, we give them information, say, listen, when you get released, if you want to show up, here's where it is, here's what time it is, or you can meet me here, cool. And then you leave it. It's more likely they will come along and show up. So...
And it lasts longer because they are showing up of their own decision, not because they think they owe us something or want to pay us back or please us, or like, which I think is what we've learned when you're in that position with someone in prison in the most vulnerable time of their life. They are so grateful for the support, but if we're not careful, they'll feel like they owe us something when they get out, and actually that's not the case at all. And what we want is for them to be able to make decisions for their own good, not just because they think a lot of us and want to do the right thing that we say for them to do. So
yeah, and the more people from a church that they meet while they're inside prison, the better as well. So on Sunday mornings, we'll have a team, sometimes like 8-9 people from the church that'll come, and and sometimes not even really do anything, just come to the church service in the prison and sit beside someone and have a little chat, and that's it. But then I think that really increases the chances of when someone gets released, they'll come along to church because they'll know a group of people rather than just coming because they know me and Charis.
Yeah.
They'll come because they know loads of people. So we really want to get churches like in the prison, like get their faces known around the place, so that it just makes it less uncomfortable for them when they come out to actually go to church. It's complicated. Like we're still getting it wrong a lot, and we're still learning how to do it. We've recently also started like a monthly, we call it a Connect night, that is really like a gathering for some food and like some prayer and just time to hang out for anyone who's part of our teams that volunteer in the prisons all across London, and not in all the different prisons. People who, are involved in criminal justice, who are Christian, the guys who've been in prison, who just got released maybe freshly that week or even 20 years ago or whatever. It's kind of a time when we can all come together, and we sort of host that as an evening. And it's been the same with that, hasn't it? Like the less sort of pressure we put on people, the softer we are with our invitation, the more likely they are to come up.
Interesting.
It's weird. It's almost like the opposite of what you would expect. Yeah. And I don't know what it's like in other kind of types of ministry, but that's just what we've found. Because in prison, I think as well, there's a lot of tough men who want to be independent, who don't, like, I don't really talk about mentors anymore, because you say to them...
It's demeaning, it sounds, right? It sounds like you're dependent. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, why would I want to be a mentee?
Yep.
I'm going to go out and be successful. I don't need you to tell me how to do it.
I've never had that feeling.
Well, I
love a mentor myself.
I hate being told what to do. I would feel so patronised if someone came and offered like a mentor for me. I'd run a mile. So no, I don't talk about that to guys anymore. I would never say I can give you a mentor.
I would too. It would be more of a jog for me at this stage, but I sympathize. Yeah. Charis, you said something interesting that among the three people, I think three groups of people that have to be visited daily. One of those groups is people who have just finished their first night in prison. And so, I'm thinking about what an interesting moment that in some cases this would be the first time that you meet someone, right? Yeah. In other cases, you've worked with men who have been in prison for a little while. In other cases, even after they've gotten out. So can I ask you to reflect for us a little bit on the relationship, how the personal relationship plays into evangelism, evangelism in particular. So if you meet someone, this is morning one for this gentleman. Yeah. What's it like? Can you evangelize? What's it like evangelizing in that context? Do you take one particular approach, or I've known this guy for years and I finally have an opportunity, or I've been sharing the gospel with him every week for. So what's that like?
So with the people who it's their first night, the nice thing about having that duty that day as a chaplain is that one of the things that you're doing is checking their religious registration. So because we have to, again, by law, have that recorded, even if it's of no religion, we have to make sure that it is recorded in the prison by law. So when I'm visiting those people, I'm asking, can I check we've got your religious registration down correct? If they are, or they state that they are of a Christian faith, or that they would identify themselves as having a Christian background, that's a lovely open door to then, because I'm a Christian chaplain, to be able to have that conversation with them there and then. Because for a lot of people coming into prison, they might identify as Christian, but they will have never been to church, or they might go once a year at Christmas. They'll actually have no actual belief. They won't have been saved. It will be because of a grandparent or because of what they grew up with. So there's a lot, even though people might identify as that in prison, you may as well view them as someone who's never heard the gospel before. So
at least if you have that identification, you have sort of an on-ramp for conversation. Exactly. At least you can say, so Granny took you to church, right?
Exactly,
and you can,
exactly that.
Okay.
And that's those are lovely conversations to have because, like you say, you've got that open door straight away. And then we would, I would say in that conversation, are you interested in coming to church? Are you interested in coming to groups? And so I could sign them up for those things where you can then have a longer conversation. Because usually when you're doing receptions, you might have like 30 people that you've got to see in the space of an hour.
Oh, I
So
see.
it's like
Okay.
it's quite sort of you can't be too long apart unless somebody is in a particularly distressed state, which does happen. You know, if it's their first time ever in prison, then that is
Or if they're very young.
or if they're
like
very, very
an
young or
18-year-old or
vulnerable.
something.
So you're kind of when I've got that hat on, I'm thinking about the gospel, I'm thinking about evangelism, I'm thinking about this. Often I'm thinking, Luke would love this guy, and so wanting to get them into our groups as soon as possible. But you're also looking for all of the things that you need to be aware of as a chaplain anyway, like things like self-harm or things like that you'll need to raise with the mental health team and stuff. So you've got a million different things that you're thinking at the same time. But most of the time I'll then put those people on groups and services so that we can then spend longer with them and start these conversations.
And those Wednesday afternoon groups that we do, I think that's really the central focus of everything that we do. So when on a Sunday morning, we might have 80 men and a bunch of officers in the room. Wow. And you're kind of, even if I'm at the front doing the talk, I'll extend an invite, sign up for groups midweek. So that's where we meet people and we try and get them to come on a Wednesday. And when you're out in the wings chatting to people, we try and get them to sign up to come on a Wednesday because we've got a team of volunteers in on a Wednesday afternoon. We're either bringing in a guest speaker or doing some sort of material, say Christianity Explored, for example, something like that, where they're talking about faith. We do discussion groups. But within that afternoon session, we do a really long coffee break where we're just chatting to guys and it's really casual. And they think they're just having a cup of tea and chatting to a lovely volunteer from the outside, but we're sort of sussing out what's going on and we're, planting seeds and having particular questions and conversations. And that's really the focus of a lot of what we do, isn't it? Every activity we have in the prison, certainly from my perspective, is to try and get them along on a Wednesday afternoon. And those discussion groups we have are really important because I think men in general never sit around in a circle and talk about stuff, and definitely not guys in prison. A lot of them probably haven't done well in school or haven't enjoyed school anyway, and they don't like sitting around talking about their feelings or emotions. So in a prison context of say a bunch of really tough lads all sitting in a circle talking about how they need to forgive someone or these it's really powerful. And a lot of them love it, and I think they get really into it and they want to come back and they want to invite their cellmates, and they're always coming to us every week. People are coming to us with a little scrap of paper with a guy's name on the wing. They're like, this guy needs to come, can you go and get him, can you bring him? So they're really enthusiastic about bringing others to it, and then that multiplies a lot more when they're a Christian prisoner. When they get fired up for the gospel, they're the ones who are my cellmate's a Muslim. Can I bring him up? And we've been talking about faith. We've been having these conversations. We sit up all night arguing. Can I bring him? So it's they're the people we want to get out there and just help them. Do it in an appropriate way.
And actually, what's really interesting about those people is if they do find faith and they get saved in prison, and they come out and for whatever kind of injustice they are recalled, and we have people that have been totally transformed, come out of prison just in a really good place, sharing their faith with other people, and then they get recalled for no reason whatsoever, and suddenly they're back in prison. There's a guy at the moment because he was on a life sentence, there aren't even any charges, but because of an allegation which turned out to be false, he was recalled to prison, and now he has to sit a parole hearing to get out again. So he's literally back in prison for nothing. But because of that longevity of relationship that we carry on with, he'll say to me on the phone, I don't understand why God's allowed this to happen, but maybe there's people in here that he wants me to reach for him, and I'm the only person that can do that. And that will always brings me to tears, because I just think that's how this is real for you, that you're able to view this situation as well, I'm in the mission field now, so who can I reach, who can I go to? And that for me is some of the best, you're okay, this was great.
And that's not from him, from that individual, that's not just empty talk, because he is genuinely the only person that can reach a lot of people. He was a very notorious bad man, everyone knows him, everyone knows his name, the officers know his name. He's been in most prisons in the UK, and he can go to the young guys and they'll know who he is, and he can talk to them directly and challenge them directly about things. He can say things to people that no one else could, and that's really powerful. It reminds me of another. We have a gentleman who comes in and does a talk for us maybe 2 or 3 times a year. He's one of the most amazing, men. He's retired military in the UK. He's coming in a couple of months' time in April, I think he's coming in to share. And he, I mean, is it okay to mention him by name, you think?
Maybe not. Just
maybe I won't, just
to
in
err
case.
on the side of caution.
But he was senior in the military, and he comes and he says things to the men that no one else can. And he talks about taking responsibility for what you've done, because he says, in my life, I need to take responsibility for what I've done. As like a senior, military person, I like advised our government to do things that were wrong. I've seen this, I've done this, I've been responsible for it, and I have to own up to that. He's like, I'm gonna have to stand in front of God and take responsibility for what I've done. So he's looking at boys who are about to go to trial for a murder charge or something, and he's like, you're here, you're sitting in prison, it's time to own up to what you've done. And that's really tough words. Obviously there's many people in prison who aren't guilty, they're there for whatever reason, but he's able to confront people directly because he's been there, and with the other guy we're talking about, he can do that as well because he's been there, done that, and he can say things to people that we could never say.
It's the frustration or the disappointments that you mentioned must be multifaceted, and I think especially of the at least when you're doing Christian ministry, you feel like the person you're working with is somewhat within your sphere of influence, but when from above the so-called justice system just throws you difficulty after difficulty, that I would have to think that the frustration, the brand of frustration, even in the UK in a situation like that, is not too far from political persecution, where the system is deliberately persecuting Christians. Just the effect that it has, as you mentioned, Charis, a reformed gentleman having to return just because of the sort of the details of the process and so on.
Yeah.
But Charis, if I could ask you a question, it strikes me that in all of this, you've spoken only about what you are able to do for prisoners, but you haven't mentioned any discomfort on your part being a female chaplain surrounded by male prisoners. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I'm fascinated that it hasn't even come up.
Yeah, well, no, I get asked it a lot, so I totally understand. Interestingly, in the UK and in our prison especially, the chaplaincy is actually majority female chaplains, which is interesting. And so for that reason, and actually other staff members like drugs workers or resettlement workers, there's quite a high proportion of female staff in the prison. So it doesn't feel uncomfortable when you kind of look out at the sort of work context that you're in. But there are definitely precautions that I would have to take as a female working in a male establishment. The nuances are that as a chaplaincy staff member, you are, on the whole, less likely to be a victim of violence or an attack in terms of a prisoner on staff violence, because chaplaincy are viewed as the good guys, the people that are really there to advocate, to help. And there's a lot of respect for chaplaincy staff. So I've been working there with different hats on for 15 years or so now, and I haven't ever had haven't had anyone act violently or aggressively towards me.
Wow. Okay.
In a manner of which I would feel unsafe. But female staff are at risk of manipulation or conditioning or being taken hostage potentially. So, and I'm quite short in stature, and I look younger than I am. So those are the things that I know that I need to remember at all times when I'm working in a prison. But if you know what those rules are, like I don't stand in front. I don't go into cells, for example. I choose not to carry cell keys as well. Some chaplains will carry cell keys so we can open the cells ourselves, but I choose not to because I think it's not wise. I wouldn't stand in front of an open cell door. I'd only go into a cell if I had an officer with me, for example. And then other things like, in terms of manipulation and conditioning, you become very you just know what kind of questions a prisoner will ask you if they're trying to test if you're easily manipulated or not, and you just shut it down straight away.
Sadly, we've seen it go wrong for people, you
Yeah.
know, over the years. People who have fallen under conditioning and manipulation or have entered into inappropriate relationships, and
Yeah.
it doesn't end well.
Not in terms of our own volunteers, I should
No,
say.
no, no.
This
we're
is
very strict with
other
our own.
stuff.
We train our own volunteers very well, and we help them have really strong boundaries and understand the rules.
Yeah.
We're very strong on that. We look after our volunteers well. I
Yeah.
hope they would agree if they ever listen to this.
I also think that there's, you know, and I think I say this a lot, but when they meet Luke and myself, they meet us as a married couple. They hear that we are married, and there, I think, is very unusual in a prison context that you've got two people in chaplaincy who are working together who are married. And so there is I think there's a fascination in some ways because it's like, oh, this is unusual and strange. But then there's also this kind of, alongside all the work that we're doing, we're also modelling relationship. And we're obviously very professional in prison context and stuff, but you're being watched all the time anyway. And so if we can like model good relationship as well as the mission work, I think and that's what the guys talk about. And so when they are approaching us, they're approaching us as a couple together. And a byproduct of that is that I'm probably a lot safer because they meet Luke at the same time. So it's like, it's quite nice.
I'd say I probably feel more at risk of violence than you
Yeah.
do. When I'm out and about on the wings, people think, you know, I work for the council, or I'm an immigration officer, or I'm undercover police, which is obviously riskier for me. You know.
Have you had any training that might help in a situation like
No,
that?
I would. I do like fighting, but I would never. We're not allowed to get involved in anything. If there's an incident on the wings, we have to get out of the way as quickly as possible and let the officers deal with it. Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
Luke, let me ask you this. Charis as well. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You mentioned that you work, so you're doing your ministry in the prison, but you also work with churches to encourage them to take on this ministry or to consider it.
Yeah.
We have that kind of audience listening to the Westminster Podcast,
Yeah.
seminary students, graduates, pastors. Let me put it this way. Give your pitch, encourage us a little bit to think about prison ministry, and obviously the context is different, but what's especially appealing to the Lord's people about your ministry?
Well, what I enjoy most, if I was just thinking as a member of a church, what I think the best part of it is when people leave prison and join your church, they can shake things up a little bit. They're bringing a different perspective. Like my favorite thing.
Luke, you're supposed to make it appealing.
No, it's good. Trust me, it's good. The thing I enjoy, I'll tell you why. Because the thing I enjoy most is when you read the Bible with people in prison, or like our Bible studies on the outside with the guys. They're bringing a fresh perspective to things that I would never have thought of, and they always have like the most amazing insight or questions, or as opposed to someone who's been churched, someone who's gone to Sunday school. They think they know the right thing to say, the right answers. Our guys and girls generally don't have that. It's quite fresh to them, and like it's amazing, and it's often very, very entertaining and good fun. But also, I think to get involved in prison ministry from a church or from a church leader perspective, you don't need to jump in with both feet straight away. When I'm approaching churches in London, I'm always saying, start by praying. Pray for the prison, pray for the prisoners, pray for the staff. Chaplains often feel quite isolated. It can be quite a lonely job for them. So if a church was to contact the prison Christian chaplain and say, is there anything we can do to help you? Is there anything we can do to pray for you? That can make them feel supported. And the church can almost just take that on as a way to start. And that might lead into something. It might turn into a full-blown, you're running groups, you're running Bible studies, you're visiting men. I think you're going to find, and it's probably better just to have a small number of people in your church who get involved. It's not for everyone in the sense that it's not for lots of people. We've got a very specific small teams, don't we? Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, I say no to churches and church people more than I say yes. We get approached often. I get emails or calls constantly from people feeling like it's, God has called us to prison ministry. We need to go in and tell these poor prisoners about Jesus, And I'm like, no, there's lots of people doing that already. You should be coming and saying, is there anything we can do to help, or how can we get involved? Don't come in with your own thing. So I think if I was talking to a church leader, I would say approach it with humility. It's the same with any type of ministry, isn't it? We get approached all the time by people who also have got these great ideas for something, they think they can change the world with this idea. And my first question is always, is there anyone else already doing that? Mm-hmm. Go, and if they say, I don't know, say, well, go and find out. And if there is, ask them questions and, shadow them for 6 months. And then if your idea still stands, then push forward with it. So, yeah, I suppose my advice to churches would just be like, start small, like start by praying, like contact the chaplaincy, contact the prison, contact, the experts like Prison Fellowship or whoever it might be, and find out more. And then it'd be so wonderful if one day you could be a church that is ready to accept people who, when they come out of prison and they want that fresh start, they want that kind of non-judgmental, welcoming, like completely loving community that they maybe haven't had at any other point of their life. You could be that community for them. I think the church is the only place that can actually do that, Like a man can come out of prison and join a football team, or like join the local darts team in his pub, or whatever other community thing it might be, but they can't offer what a church can offer, And the other thing to say on that, I think, is church is daunting. It can be hard for people to get. We've already mentioned a few reasons why. You could be homeless, you could be unemployed, and that would carry a level of sort of a little bit of shame around it, which is why we believe in like bridge ministries, like something between prison and church, like our Friday morning discipleship group, or Thursday night connect group. We try and help encourage churches, for whoever they're trying to reach, have a bridge ministry, build something that's like a stepping stone into church, because coming along on a Sunday morning is probably not going to be the entry point for most people, especially those who are a bit marginalised, or a new immigrant, or whatever it might be.
A friend of mine says your church should have a back row, which means should welcome folks who just kind of wander in and wander out. But you're lowering the ladder, so to speak, even further. I can see how important that is. That's really helpful. Charis, anything to add?
I guess to that point, that last point, church being accessible for people who don't come from maybe a traditionally educated background, I think is really important. So those bridge ministries that Luke talked about, an alternative or an offering in the week, or something that you can offer that means it's okay if you haven't been to university, if you're not used to sitting and listening to one person speak for half an hour, because actually a lot of people in prison have neurodiversity. There's a lot, certainly in the UK prisons, there's a lot of people with ADHD, or just kind of learning difficulties that mean that the kind of traditional church environment, if they need to get up and walk around, or if they, their attention span only lasts sort of 15 minutes, what can you offer within your church that means that those people can be reached? And I think that's something I feel really passionate about for all churches. Our church service in the prison is designed specifically because we know the kind of majority attention span in the room will be significantly lower than like your average church on the outside. So we try and make sure that we've got kind of components in there that mean that it's easier for people to engage. And I think the other thing that we've learned with the kind of population that we work with is that learning, the best kind of learning for people who have been in prison is within a discussion group, within a Bible study. And so we try and put a lot of emphasis on that work and that ministry, as opposed to a church service. So yeah, inviting someone to a Bible study is probably the best foot forward to begin with, I would say.
And if churches are interested or they don't really know where to start, we've got a lot of sort of knowledge of resources that we've used over the years that really help people. So we love using things like the Action Bible, which is like a graphic novel kind of version of the Bible. So we have a lot of guys who would have, issues just sitting down and reading. So
does it have pictures of Jesus in it? Don't answer that. I'm just
well, it does, and it's one that we're happy to use and to give to people. Yeah, it's really good.
We actually had a guy who couldn't read or write, but got saved through the Action Bible.
Yeah.
Like that's where he first came to faith. It was
It was so
where he
precious
first-
to him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He took it. He got moved around different prisons, and he took it with him everywhere, and he loved it so much. So, there was a very generous church down in the southwest of England that did a Christmas fundraiser, and they asked us what can we give money for, and I said buy us 20 Action Bibles, because the guys love them. So things like that, and then we do courses like Hope Explored, as part of that Christianity Explored series. It's very interactive. We love doing that. So anything with like a DVD that you can watch, some kind of interactive activity, and then discussion groups. It's not difficult to run those at a church, for like a men's group or for like even young people, who are struggling with attention to sit still for a while. So anyone wants to ask questions about those, we've kind of learnt a lot of good ones that can work quite well over the years. There's another amazing course we run called Difference, which is kind of using the Bible to talk about conflict and how to disagree well. It's like a 6-part course, and it's very interactive. And we piloted that. We were the first prison in the world to do it, I believe. And now they've developed a prisons version of it that we helped them with. And it's been run in prisons in South Africa, Egypt, Hong Kong, America. It's amazing.
I think everyone with internet access needs to take that course.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say?
We always say every church should do the Difference course. It's it's really good. It works well in prison because everyone can picture people that they disagree with or have conflict with very easily.
I can imagine. Luke and Charis, this has been really lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
The Lord's blessing on your ministry. This is a Westminster Podcast.